Alright, welcome to TACTALK. This is Season 2, Episode 17. I'm your host, Aldemore. So today we're going to start out with quite a few articles in the first segment. In the second segment, I'm going to be finishing up with the open letter written by Bob Ferguson to the state sheriff. So in the first segment, we have two articles I want to read. It's going to be the Bob Ferguson says sheriffs could be held liable if they don't enforce 1639, as well as what I found interesting is the Daily Evergreen wrote an article called The Umbrella Gun Laws Like I-1639 Criminalize Legal Gun Owners. So I want to share that because I thought it was kind of an interesting perspective from the opposite side of the coin here. So starting with this one, it was date here, February 12th, 2019, so just yesterday. It says county sheriffs who say they want to enforce Washington's new stricter gun laws could be held liable if they refuse to perform enhanced background checks, and someone who shouldn't buy a gun is able to buy one and uses it in a crime, Washington Attorney General Bob Ferguson said on Tuesday. In an open letter to law enforcement, Ferguson wrote that he was confident the wide-ranging law was constitutional and would withstand court challenges, but that he was concerned about threats, mostly from county sheriffs, to not enforce the new law. At least 13 county sheriffs have said that they won't enforce the law, Initiative 1639, which voters passed by a wide margin in November. Not a wide margin. Let's just make sure that there was a majority of Seattle and Olympia that voted for it. 13 counties voted against it, and it's it's quite a bit of counties in our state. Most of the new law, which raises the minimum age to buy semi-automatic rifles, requires enhanced background checks for those rifles and can hold gun owners responsible if their gun was stored carelessly and is used in a crime. Has not yet gone into effect. Only the higher age limit, raised from 18 to 21, is now in effect. The rest of the law goes into effect July 1st. Now, however, real quick side note, the writer of this article obviously is not aware of the gun shops who are selling currently to 18-year-olds because in July 1st, 1639 is legally defined. However, you can't discriminate against age when it comes to sales of product or services if the law has not been legally defined. So as of right now, there's a big limbo with I-1639 that our governor and our attorney general says that needs to be enforced, but yet they haven't properly defined the law. In November, the NRA and the Second Amendment Foundation sued Ferguson and the state of Washington in federal court, arguing the law was unconstitutional. The lawsuit was withdrawn on Monday after Ferguson sought to have it dismissed on procedural grounds, but the lawsuit was simultaneously refiled, this time listing the Clark County Sheriff, the Spokane Police Chief, and the Director of the State Department of Licensing as defendants. The sheriff claims that the law is unconstitutional, but most have been vague about which parts of the new law they object to and which parts they will not enforce. The main responsibility for local law enforcement under the new law is to run the enhanced background checks, searching at least 3 state and federal databases and checking for outstanding warrants and pending criminal charges. It is the aspect of the law which local law enforcement has performed for years on anyone who tries to buy a handgun that Ferguson said he is most concerned about. These enhanced background checks keep guns out of the hands of dangerous individuals who lawfully cannot own firearms because of a mental illness or criminal record, Ferguson wrote. As far as I know, no Washington sheriff or police chief has refused to perform these enhanced background checks for handguns. Why refuse to perform them for semi-automatic assault rifles? So, just this article. This is written by Seattle Times, so you can imagine the perspective that I'm reading from this right now. But, it sounds like the writer's not very aware of what's going on with the whole movement of I-1639, and he's making his own opinions about, because, for example, quite a few sheriffs have come out and have actually shared exactly which parts they want to defend and which parts are unconstitutional and things like that, even defining what an assault weapon is, assault, quote-unquote, So, moving on to this umbrella gun laws like I-1639 criminalize legal gun owners. This is by the Daily Evergreen, so I thought this would be interesting to want to share. And for the first article that I read here by Seattle Times, just wanted to point that out. I'm not a big fan of Seattle Times, but need to get them at least a shout out because they're on the same topic that we're discussing here, so need to share that. The links will be made available here at the bottom of the YouTube channel as well as the Facebook link for the live broadcast. So this is written February 12th, 2019. Looks like an Evergreen columnist named Bruce Mulmet. Many gun owners claim lawmakers do not understand them, and the recently passed Initiative I-1639 reflects this. With the implementation of new gun control laws, there are always concerns about what they will do to restrict gun owners' rights. This initiative in particular received a great deal of backlash. The parameters of this law offers little leniency to those who don't abide by it. Nicholas Saylor, president of WSU's gun club, said he doesn't agree with any aspect of the law, save for the background check. The rest of it is unconstitutional, Saylor said. The restrictions placed by the state of Washington make I-1639 unconstitutional. It effectively criminalized an entire body of legal gun owners by raising the age requirement for owning semi-automatic rifles to 21. That's the whole point of the age discrimination there. Another point, and that's, again, if you're 19, you own a rifle, and they just passed this law, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to legally turn in your rifle according to the law, which is a violation of your constitutional right to not, infringe on your Second Amendment. Another portion of this law Saylor disagreed with was with the requirement to take a class on firearm safety. With the class, it is a de facto firearms registration, so essentially, law enforcement would know that you own that rifle, Saylor said. This may not seem alarming to non-gun owners, but many who do legally own guns see this as the beginning of the path to gun confiscation. Remember, for confiscation, you have to begin with registration. Many supporters of assault weapon bans may advocate for this, yet we cannot forget the Second Amendment honors all types of arms, not weapons for specific scenarios. However, the main concern for gun owners in the state of Washington is the scope of the law and the law enforcement refusing to enforce it. There are 7 counties as of now, and the town of Republic have said they're not going to enforce this law because it is against the Constitution and it is unenforceable, Saylor said. The pushback from law enforcement in several counties shows they view I-1639 as an impractically enforceable law. Impractically enforceable law. At most, police agencies tend to agree with any sort of legislation that reduces the possibility for firearm use against them. This shows that the initiative is inherently unreasonable. Unfortunately, for the gun owners in the state of Washington, this bill cannot be challenged until someone is arrested. If this happens in the near future, the result will likely go in favor of gun owners due to the Supreme Court being mostly conservative now. It is important to see both sides of an issue. While many may view I-1639 as one of the most important bills in the fight against gun violence, it makes a group of law-abiding citizens feel that their rights are being infringed upon. The owners who obtain and use guns legally are the ones actually criminalized. The initiative does nothing to curb the real epidemic of gun violence. While there is no clear solution to solving gun violence in America or in the state of Washington, I-1639 is a clear example of what not to do. Some may think that it is acceptable to restrict someone's right to purchase or own a firearm, but implementing legislation without understanding the issue will backfire immediately. Education is the first step to understanding something, so go to a gun club or firearms-related organization to get information on this side. That way, the next time a law like this is voted on, you'll know how and who it really affects. So that's a very interesting piece when it comes to the Daily Evergreen. So I thought it would be interesting to share. Again, at least it can be made available at the bottom of the YouTube link as well as the Facebook live broadcast. And the second segment, we're going to be going over an article, one I felt was really interesting, again, on this same topic, since it's getting so involved here, is Washington Prohibitionists Jump Gun on I-1639 lawsuit claim. And finally, I've pulled up the response letter from our Attorney General, Bob Ferguson, here in Washington State, his open letter to law enforcement on Initiative 1639. So I'm going to be reading his exact words once we get done with that. I've shared that article to my personal social media profiles. It looks like I've had some friends already try to reach out to Bob Ferguson by phone, and he's obviously not going to be calling them back. So yeah, stay tuned. In the next segment, we'll be going over those articles. Thanks for listening. We'll be right back. Bees Combat Systems at beescombatsystems.com. Protecting those who prepare. 801-987-0893 for custom body armor carriers and tactical gear for military, law enforcement, contractors, corporate security, responsible citizens, and border patrol. Bees Combat Systems at beescombatsystems.com. 801-987-0893. Alright, welcome back to our second segment. This is Season 2, Episode 17 of TACTALK. I'm your host, Aldemar. So I have an article here that was written by the Liberty Park Press. It covers, it's also written February 12th. Let's see here, who is the writer? Dave Workman. It covers Alan Gottlieb, the Second Amendment Foundation founder. And he speaks about the recent article, or recent letter that Bob Ferguson just released to the sheriffs, and kind of points out some really good factors that are involved with that. So I'm going to read that, and then finally, but not least, I'm going to read the actual open letter written by Bob Ferguson to those sheriffs. So This one says the Seattle-based gun prohibition lobby that supported a citizen initiative now being challenged in federal court declared victory too soon when plaintiffs simply changed the defendants in their challenge of anti-gun initiative 1639, according to Cairo Radio News, which broke the story. The initiative was passed by voters last fall, but already garnering resistance from a majority of county sheriffs. This comes as Attorney General Bob Ferguson, who endorsed Initiative 1639, has sent an open letter to the sheriffs threatening them if they don't enforce the law the Seattle Times is reporting. In his letter, Ferguson promises he will defend the initiative against any legal challenge. But according to Alan Gottlieb, founder and executive vice president of the Second Amendment Foundation, the Attorney General has been dropped as a defendant because he says he shouldn't be a defendant in a case and defend the law. So he named a police chief and a sheriff instead. The measure is being challenged in U.S. District Court for the Western District of Washington. Plaintiffs are the Second Amendment Foundation, the National Rifle Association, 2 firearm retailers, and 4 young adults whose Second Amendment rights are essentially stripped by the new law. One of those plaintiffs, Nathaniel Casey, was denied purchase of a semi-auto rifle last week, according to KXLY News. Instead of Ferguson, the refiled lawsuit is now naming Clark County Sheriff Charles Atkins, Spokane Police Chief Craig Meadle, and Teresa Bernston, Director of the State Department of Licensing. It was quietly refiled Friday, according to an attorney representing the plaintiffs. But news of the development was apparently lost in the snowstorm panic. But the billionaire-backed Alliance for Gun Responsibility essentially went off half-cocked with a news release declaring that the plaintiffs had voluntarily dismissed their suits. Well, not exactly. Here's what Alliance CEO Renee Hopkins stated, and it's a quote. "We have always been confident that Initiative 1639 would withstand this challenge. While this is not exactly the path we expected, the outcome is the same. Initiative 1639 remains the law of the land in Washington. A number of law enforcement officials have come forward recently claiming they will not enforce the initiative while this challenge makes its way through the courts. Now that there is no longer a pending lawsuit, we expect these sheriffs will stop playing politics with the safety of their communities and resume doing their job by enforcing the laws of the state and respecting the will of Washingtonians." End quote. The federal lawsuit remains pending. County sheriffs who have declared they will not enforce provisions of the initiative on constitutional grounds evidently have no reason to change their minds. In an interview with Cairo Radio's Hannah Scott, Gottlieb observed, "I don't know why the Alliance put a release out. It's sloppy on their part." I-1639 was sold to voters as a school safety measure, but opponents contend there is nothing in its 30 pages that specifically deals with that subject. There are a lot of other components of the initiative which some people believe violates a single subject rule for citizen initiatives in Washington. However, no lawsuit has been filed so far on that issue. So we're going to end that there. I've included this link in both the YouTube as well as the Facebook live broadcast. And moving on, we have finally the actual open letter written by our Attorney General Bob Ferguson to the county sheriffs that are refusing to enforce Initiative 1639. So this was for immediate release. You can find this at the Washington State Office of the Attorney General. It's an actual website. It's the atg.wa.gov. And this is AG Ferguson issues open letter to law enforcement on I-1639. So open letter to Washington sheriffs and police chiefs refusing to enforce Initiative 1639. This is Bob Ferguson's words. Excuse me. In November 2018, Washingtonians overwhelmingly adopted Initiative 1639. Numerous sheriffs and police chiefs have stated they will not implement or enforce the initiative. I want to share my thoughts on that important issue, which affects both the safety of our communities and respect for the rule of law. Like all laws passed by the people of Washington and their representatives, Initiative 1639 is presumed constitutional. No court has ruled that the initiative is unconstitutional. Now, hold on. Judge Dixon dismissed it as unconstitutional. But then another court moved it forward. I will defend Initiative 1639 against an illegal challenge. My office defeated the legal challenge to the previous gun safety initiative passed by the people, and I am confident we will defeat any constitutional challenge to Initiative 1639 as well. Local law enforcement officials are entitled to their opinions about the constitutionality of any law, but those personal views do not absolve us of our duty to enforce Washington laws and protect the public. Now remember, sheriffs have the right, as most of them are elected, to be able to not obey unjust laws, so they can actually disobey unjust laws. I would like to focus on one component of Initiative 1639, in which you play a vital role. and have a legal obligation effective July 1st. Initiative 1639 requires enhanced background checks for the purchase of semi-automatic assault rifles, which are identical to the enhanced background checks currently required for all handgun purchases in Washington State. Just like handgun purchases, local law enforcement officials are required to perform these background checks. Local law enforcement has been performing these enhanced background checks for all handgun purchases in Washington State for many years. Now, hold on. On that note, Bob Ferguson, we are backed up 3 years on handgun background checks. The database is backed up 3 years. That was a recent report in this past 2019 that was actually released. These enhanced background checks keep guns out of the hands of dangerous individuals who lawfully cannot own firearms because of a mental illness or criminal record. As far as I know, no Washington sheriff or police chief has refused to perform these enhanced background checks for handguns. Why refuse to perform them for semi-automatic assault rifles? I am deeply concerned that the failure of local law enforcement to perform Initiative 1639's background check requirement will jeopardize public safety in our state by allowing the sale of semi-automatic assault rifles to dangerous individuals not lawfully allowed to own a gun. State law provides immunity to local law enforcement officers who run these checks in good faith. However, and this is bold, this is actually boldized in the actual article. However, in the event a police chief or sheriff refuses to perform the background check required by Initiative 1639, they could be held liable if there is a sale or transfer of a firearm to a dangerous individual prohibited from possessing a firearm, and that individual uses that firearm to do harm. In short, the taxpayers of your city or county assume the financial risk of your decision to impose your personal views over that law. So this is where he's actually muddling up the definition of the I-1639 versus what laws are already on the table. And I'm going to continue reading this, but I do want to stop that there just to interject this point. Bob Ferguson's assuming that these sheriffs are not going to perform any background check on a sale or purchase of any firearm at this point. We already have background checks in place. In order to buy any firearm as of right now in this state, you have to get a background check. Even if you're a multiple firearm owner, you still have to continue with a new background check form every time you purchase a new firearm. So he's muddling up the definition of not just 1639, but the original laws that are already on file. He just reaffirmed the laws that are already on the books. So he's acting like the sheriffs aren't going to do background checks and then tell the sheriff because of 1639 that if someone buys a gun, you're going to be held liable. That doesn't make any sense at this point. At that point, you can hold the sheriff of any county liable for any type of illegal firearm sale at that point that's used in a crime. And then you can just assume that the sheriff's going to run a background check on that sale. So now you're literally, it's called entrapment at that point. Moving on. Outside your legal obligation to perform background checks, you have discretion, of course, to prioritize your resources. This is a trust placed on you by the Washingtonians you serve. Enforcement discretion, however, cannot subvert the rule of law. All Washingtonians, including those of us in government, are equally subject to the law. Analogies to marijuana and immigration law enforcement are misplaced. This is not a situation where the federal government is trying to force a state to enforce federal laws. Rather, Initiative 1639 was submitted to the people of Washington and was adopted as a state law by nearly 60% of the people. No action by a city council or county commission can change this state law or the responsibilities and duties that the law vests in Washington's law enforcement agencies. Again, yes, he's wrong there. Again, because we're not a democracy. We don't live by mob rule or majority vote. We live as a republic, individual rights. I am personally deeply opposed to the death penalty and have maintained reservations about its constitutionality for many years, but my personal feelings about the death penalty did not impact my duties as Attorney General. Last October, our state Supreme Court unanimously ruled in State v. Gregory that Washington's death penalty was applied in an arbitrary and racially biased manner. Until the Gregory decision, however, my office continued to defend the death sentence in federal courts when death row inmates filed appeals, even after the governor announced his moratorium. I did this out of respect for the rule of law. At the same time, I proposed legislation to the state legislature to abolish the death penalty. If you personally disagree with Initiative 1639, seek to change it or file a lawsuit challenging it, but do not substitute your personal views over that of the people. Again, it's been there's been multiple agencies challenging it. Even right now, we have 4, I can't say minors because they're over 18, but 4 individuals affected by the age discrimination laws. Under Article 1, Section 1 of the Washington State Constitution, all political power is inherent in the people, and governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed and are established to protect and maintain individual rights. As public officers, our duty is to abide by the will of the people we serve and implement and enforce the laws they adopt. I encourage you to do so. So again, he's muddling up so many different definitions. Long story short, just because the people vote 90% that we should have, you know, no shoes on Fridays, doesn't mean you have to obey that law or enforce it. So it's just, again, 1639 does nothing to help sheriffs or law enforcement enforce a law that's not already on the books. So it does nothing to help keep guns out of criminals. Criminals already do not obey the laws. It's not even an extra slap charge or not. It's just ridiculous. All it does is hold people accountable who may have their firearms stolen and didn't know about it for 24 hours. So it's getting ridiculous. So again, the links are going to be at the bottom of both the YouTube and the Facebook. Comments. Let's see what your thoughts are, feedback. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.